In the last video, we started our journey on optimization and cleaning all that up, and we're going to continue right along in this video. Last video, we did like the search VC. Remember I said we're going to do it like screen by screen? Well, not everything's on a screen, right? Some of this stuff is like miscellaneous. Like for example, in this video, we're going to optimize our GFAlert view controller, and we're going to optimize our networking layer a little bit as well. So this is kind of like a miscellaneous, not on a screen, but let's dive in. So like I said, we're going to start with our GFAlert view controller. So in custom views, view controllers, GFAlertVC. And one real quick thing, start this off easy. Here is view.background color. Remember I created a UI color with red, green, blue, all zeros to make black and alpha 75. Well, you can actually write this a little bit neater. You can do UI color.black with alpha component and 0.75, right? Because we did 75% alpha. So that just reads better than what we had right before. We just had a color with 000. Most people know that's black, but some may not. This is just, plain as day. It's black with an alpha of 0.75. Much easier to read. And then some of you may have already done this. We talked about this being the homework, how, we're stylizing this container view, right? With the background color, corner radius 2. And this is the container view here you see on the screen, the white background in light mode or the black background in dark mode. It's the container view for the whole alert. We're stylizing that here. And I said part of your homework would be to refactor this out into a custom view. So if you haven't done that, we're going to do that real quick so we can get rid of this code here. Again, back to kind of the mantra we talked about is like, does my view controller need to know about this? And again, the view controller does not need to know about the specific styling for this container view. So let's go into our custom views folder, do Command N for a new CocoaTouch class. It's going to be a subclass of UI view, and we'll call it GFAlert container view. Hit next, create it. And then just like all of our other custom views, let's delete this. Let's call init. Override the frame, call super.init with frame, pass in the frame. And then here's where we're going to call our configure method. Xcode's going to yell at us for the storyboard initializer. Cool. And so now we need to write that configure method. So private func configure. And hopefully this is like repetition for you. Like I said, this was homework in the assignment. I mean, not like real homework, but this is something you could have done on your own. So in the configure method, we want to go back to our alert VC. And basically we're going to take all this stuff out. So Command X. And again, you see that really cleans up this configure container view. And go back to our alert container view. Paste that into here, except we don't need to specify container view because that's what we're in here. So if we hold Option, drag down, just delete that. Do a Command B to make sure everything's good. And we need to make sure we call the configure method in our override init. Give us that 2 vertical spaces between functions. This is the style we're going with. So yeah, background color, corner radius, all this stuff. We're translating the auto resizing mask, all that good stuff. And now in the alert VC, we need to make our container view no longer a UI view. This is now a GF alert container view. We'll initialize that, and now we should be good to go. So again, what we did here is this configure container view function. Now all we have to do is add the subview and then lay out the constraints. We're no longer doing any specific customization to the container view in the view controller, because again, our view controller doesn't need to know about this. We move that out into the alert container view, and let's run this to test. Again, you want to be testing your refactoring here. So just hit get followers. Cool, everything still works. Everything's the same. We'll do our environment overrides just to make sure we're looking good in dark mode. Hit dark, go back to our simulator, and dark mode looks good as well. So successful refactor, good to go there. And that's all I wanted to tackle in our GFAlertVC. So on to the next item. And for that, we're going to talk about convenience initializers. So let's go to, and we're going to go through our custom views here to see where we need them, because we're not going to need them on all views. So a good example is, well, let's just start from the top to find, we don't need it in our tab bar controllers, labels. Okay, so here's a good example of when we need it. So, and I shouldn't say it's needed, it just cleans things up a little bit. This is a slight optimization. So whenever we have like a custom initializer here, like on our GF title label, you'll notice like we have to call configure here, and we have to make sure we call configure in the regular init too, because sure, our custom initializer, like the user of the code has the option to either init a GF title label with the regular initializer or our custom initializer, right? That pass in text alignment or font size. The user is going to have the option for both. So for that reason, we have to make sure we call this configure in both spots. There's actually a way to make yourself not have to do that. And that's by making your custom initializers convenience initializers. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So if I type convenience init, so the big thing about convenience inits is it has to call a designated initializer. So what a designated initializer is one of the required ones for the object. In this case, it's a UI label. So init with frame is what's known as a designated initializer. Another example, if we go to our custom view controllers, this super.init with nib name bundle name, this is the designated initializer for a UI view controller. So each objects may have different designated initializers, but a convenience initializer has to call one of the designated initializers. So we're no longer calling super, we have to call self.init, and that takes in a frame and of .0 like we've been doing before. And so now basically what this does is this convenience initializer, when we use it, it will call this initializer here. So configure is going to get called here on line 25. So we no longer have to be sure to call configure here. So by making these initializers convenience inits, we just need to make sure we call configure in our designated initializer, and then we're good to go. So if we were to write 3 more custom initializers, right, for different, tweaks on our object, we just make sure we call self.init and we don't have to call configure in every single one. So that is how we're going to use convenience initializers, and we're going to go through our objects and kind of re-implement what we just did here. But I want to talk about it a little more because another benefit to convenience initializers is in the word convenience. So imagine, and I don't have an example of this, I apologize, but imagine we had an initializer that took in 7 parameters, right? We've probably seen some of those. Well, what a convenience initializer can do is give like default values for like 5 of those parameters. So the benefit of the convenience initializer in that case is that, instead of calling that super long 7 parameter, initializer, you can create a convenience initializer that maybe gives default values for like 5 of those parameters. And then your convenience initializer will only take in the remaining 2 parameters that can be different, right? So again, it's a way to like just write a cleaner init method rather than always using like a super long one. If that's the case, again, I don't have an example of that, but that is another way to use convenience initializers. Like I said, the way we're going to use them here is to make it so we don't have to call configure in all of our custom initializers, right? So it kind of cleans it up just a little bit. So again, in our label, our GF body label, same thing. Our custom initializer for text alignment, let's write convenience. And then instead of super init frame.0, call self.init frame.0. And then now we can delete this configure here, because again, we're calling this. And this is going to be pretty repetitive, but we're going to go through and do all this. So convenience, call self, and remove the configure. Okay, so that takes care of our labels. Let's look at our view controllers. So here we have a custom init, but we're not having to like call configure or any other function in multiple places. So that doesn't really apply there, doesn't apply there, doesn't apply there. The AlertVC, again, doesn't apply there. And UserInfoVC doesn't apply there. So in our view controllers, it doesn't really apply. Image views doesn't apply because we're just overriding the designated initializer, calling configure once. Cool. Text fields, GF text field, again, doesn't apply. I'm just going through this in real time. GF button, I know this is going to apply here, right? Because we're calling configure twice. So again, convenience init, call self instead of super, get rid of the configure here. Cool. And again, I'm just tidying up, cleaning up little things here and there. Okay, here we're calling configure twice again on our empty state view. So we can do the same thing. Convenience. I got to spell convenience right every single time. I don't get the autocomplete. Self.init, and then get rid of configure. Item info view. Okay, we're only calling configure once. Don't need to do it there, and don't need to do it there. And then our cells are going to be fine. I already know that. Yeah, we're good there. So all of our custom views, we've added some convenience initializers. Let me go back to one as we talk about it. Labels. So yeah, so we added our convenience initializer. So again, we don't have to call configure in all of our custom ones separately because you never know. You might create a new custom initializer, forget to call configure, just makes the code a little easier to use. All right, so now let's kind of shift towards networking. And the first place we're gonna go to is in our model, so our user model. So here you see, we have all the stuff that we get back from the user, except for created at is a string. Well, if we go to our network manager here, and in our get user network call that you see here, you see down where we're decoding the JSON, right? You see decoder.key decoding strategy equals convert from snake case. Well, there's another decoding strategy that we can use to optimize this. So you can do decoder.date date decoding strategy, and we'll say that equals, by the way, we forgot to do this. How could we forget? Oh my gosh. Now there's dot, and you can see there's a couple different date formats that you can, or date decoding strategies. We're going to use ISO 8601 because this is the standard. Remember I said if we do Command B to get rid of those. If we go back to our extensions here, our string extension, right, where we're converting to date. Remember I said this format here that is from the GitHub API of a date. Remember I said you're going to see this a lot from the servers. This is pretty standard. Well, standard is the right word there because it is the, back to Network Manager. It is the ISO 8601. I'll leave a link in the description to this video if you want to research this standard a little more, but not all, of course, but this is very, very common to see this standard from servers. So what this does, this date decoding strategy, ISO 8601, is it essentially does the same thing in our string extension that we're doing here, this convert to date. It's taking this standard format and converting it to a date object. So back in our user, we can make this created at a date. And then now, essentially what this is doing here, value of date has no, okay, so, well, let me go back before we do this error. So essentially, we can skip this step here, this whole convert to date, right? Because we're already going to get a date. Our date decoding strategy is going to convert it to a date for us. So again, this is a very common string extension. So you can keep it in your project. I'm going to delete it just because we're cleaning up here. We're getting rid of unnecessary stuff. Actually, we don't need the string extension like at all, to be honest with you. So we're going to delete that whole thing because, like I said, we already have a date object. So date plus extension, this is all we need. We just need to convert to year month format because we already have a date, right? Because the decoding strategy is doing that for us. So when I go back to this error here, click on that. Instead of user.createdAt is now a date. So now I can just call convert to year month format rather than the other function we created. So again, we're kind of skipping a step. If you remember, we went from like before in our extensions, we were going from string to date and date back to string. Now we're just getting a date from the server and converting to string. So we're kind of cutting out some steps here. And again, got to make sure our user object is a date. Let me double check our network manager, ISO strategy. Cool. Okay, so let's test this. Again, when you're refactoring, you want to be testing along the way to make sure you didn't break anything. So our labels and everything look good. Because remember we did all the convenience initializer stuff. Want to make sure you don't break anything there. Okay, moment of truth. Let's click on a user, pick a random user here, and see that it worked. Cool. We're still getting our user object. You can see our GitHub since Oct 2015 still working fine. All of our labels and buttons look good for all those convenience initializers. Things are still working. Good to go. And again, we just added this date decoding strategy to go directly to a date object in our user model. So nice little optimization there. So next up, back to our network manager, we're going to add a whole new network call. Because do you remember in the video, if I go back to the custom views, image views, avatar image view, we're doing the download image in the GF avatar image view. And if you remember in the video, like I struggled with this, I went back and forth. At the end of the day, I was convinced, let's move this into the network manager. That's where it should be. So let's go back to our network manager and we're going to create a new function here called func download image. You can do from URL. We're going to pass in a string for that. And then we do the same old completed, and it's at escaping. And in this case, we're going to return a UI image, which is optional because again, it could be nil if everything doesn't work out too well. And we're going to return void here for this closure. So the difference here, if we go back up to our other network calls, is remember we changed everything to result type where you pass back a user and an error. We're not going to use result type here because, you have to pass back an error. And if you remember the video, like we don't want to send an error if the image messes up downloading. We're just going to show the placeholder value, right? Because we don't want to bombard the user with errors. So here we're just going to pass back a UI image, and if it's nil, we're just not going to do anything. If the image is something, cool, we're going to send back the image, good to go. And then now if we go back to our avatar image view, we can basically, maybe I should have just copied and pasted this whole function, but we could basically just copy and paste this into our network manager here. So now that we have that pasted here, well, first of all, little fun fact here, you can see our alignment's like all messed up. So if you highlight the function here, and if you do Control-I, neat little trick, that'll just line everything up within the scope there. So we're missing some things, right? So URL string is not, let's keep with the pattern we've been using. So let's call that URL string, do a Command B, clear those errors. And here in our cache, so again, this network call is doing like the same thing. We're checking we're creating the cache key. We're checking to see if the image is in the cache, and if it's not in the cache, we're going to make the network call. If the image is in the cache, we're going to return that image and not make the network call. So we want to do the same thing here. So instead of setting self.image equals image, like we're in our network manager now. We're not in the image view. So here we would call completed and pass back the image, right? Because remember in our completion handler, we're passing back an optional image there. So again, we're still doing the same old cache check. Now we got to make sure our URL is good. And again, we can't just return here because we either have to return nil or an image, right? Those are the two things we have to do. So down here, let's call completed nil. And we can put that down there. So, okay, if our URL is bad, we're going to call completed nil, done, pass that through. And now let's get back to our network call, right? So we still need the capture list for weak self because we're accessing our cache if we get things right. But we can't just return. Again, we got to pass back completed nil. So I don't want to do like, right? I don't want to do this every time, like completed nil and then return and then have like a bunch of this because that'll get really long, right? It'll be just like this up here, except we got to handle like all the cases and completed nil. Here we had to do it separate out because we were passing back a different error message each time. So there we had to do it. Here, we're just passing back nil. So we can kind of combine this guard let statement. And you'll see what I mean here. So we can do, let's actually, just to make this cleaner here, so do guard let self equals self, comma, and we can do error equals nil, right? We want to make sure error equals nil. And we can get rid of this here. And we're going to do this one by one so I can illustrate what I'm doing here. Then I can put this, Command X, at the end. Basically, we're combining all these checks into one line. But as you can see, my line's getting really, really long here. It's kind of ridiculous. So what we're going to do is after every comma, put it on the next line. This is just for just kind of like neatness. And oops, I forgot to do, we have to do let in front of that. And then comma, or sorry, let, and we can get rid of this. We do data equals data here with a comma, get rid of this. And then lastly, we need to get our image here. So Command X, paste that there, line that up a bit, and we can get rid of this. But now we do our else, and then now we would call completed nil. So basically what we did is we just combined all this into like one guard statement rather than having them all separated out like we did up here. And again, we had to do it up here because we're passing back different error messages. Here we can combine them because we're passing back nil in the completed, like no matter what. So all this guard statement is handling, basically if any of these go wrong, we're going to pass back nil. And I'm going to tab this over here to basically make my everything like line up nicely. So that is combining the guard statement. And again, all this comes back as expected, like we're not passing back nil. Now we want to set our object. Let's kind of get back our spacing here. Now we're going to set the object into the cache, just like we were doing before. And instead of setting the image equal to image, now we're going to call completed and pass back the image. And this image is right here on line 118 that we got if the data from the UI image came back right? Because if it came back wrong or came back with an error, we're going to pass back nil. Let's get that going there. And then again, task.resume for the network call. Oh, I got to call a return here. All your guard statements have to have a return. Let's clean up the spacing a little bit. Cool. So now we've moved download image into the network manager. So now we can call this download image from URL on our GF avatar image view. Speaking of the GF avatar image view, let's go back, and we no longer need this whole function in here. So that's going to clean up this file a bit here. So now we need to use that network call. Well, we're doing it in the cells and the GF header view. So if we go to followers cell, right, this is already giving us an error. We can't do this anymore. So now here in set, we have to do network manager.shared.download image from the string, and that is going to be follower, right? Because we're passing the follower through here, follower.avatar URL. And then in the completed, we can return here, and we're going to get back image, right? This is an optional. And we're actually going to have to access self because we have to do self.image equals the image that we get back. So we need to do weak self. And then if you remember what we do on the weak self, we got to do guard let self equals self else return. Whoops, I forgot to get some curly braces there. And then now we can, we got to dispatch to the, well, let's get rid of this real quick because this is just causing an error and we no longer need that line of code. So now we can dispatch to the main queue here. We'll do this dispatch because anytime you're updating your UI, you want to be on the main thread, .main.async. And we can do self.avatar image view.image. And if you look at, so .image, image is an optional here, as you can see. So we can just do .image. And that is this image right here that is optional as well. So we don't have to like unwrap it because if it's nil, just not going to show anything, going to show the placeholder. And then like I like to put these on one line if it's super simple like that, just a style preference. So there we go. Now you see a little bit of extra code, but I do feel like this network call should be in the network manager. Again, like I said, I struggled. I went back and forth on that quite a bit, but at the end of the day, reading the comments, talking with people, I was like, yeah, it probably should be in there to teach proper kind of, organization here. So we're going to copy and paste this because this is going to be reused. So this was our follower cell. Let's go to our favorite cell. Again, we're going to get this error here. So let's highlight this, paste that. We're going to have to change our name here. We're no longer passing a follower. We're passing a favorite in this favorite cell. So do Command V. There we go. And then one more place that we're doing this right is our header view. So view controllers, GF user info header view. Again, here we're getting the error. So we can paste that there. Whoops, I did a wrong copy paste. Back to favorite cell. Good old copy paste. So copy back to GF user info VC. Paste this here. And again, here we're not passing a favorite. I believe we have a user, right? Yep, yes, we have the user here. So we can do user.avatar URL. And do we have avatar image view? Is that what we called it? Yes, that is what we called it, avatar image view. So this is going to all be the same. And I actually don't like the way this looks, like having this kind of code, like right, this code looks super neat. This is purely aesthetics. So I'm going to do this, func download avatar image and move this into here. So Command X. This is purely code aesthetics, my personal preference. And then we'll call download avatar image right there. To me, that just looks better. Like this whole configure UI elements, again, back to my concept of having your code read like a table of contents, right? Like to me, this just cluttered everything up. So now I know when okay, how am I configuring my UI elements? I can just be like, okay, downloading the avatar image, cool, setting all this stuff. It just declutters things, make things easier to read. So that's why I like to do little stuff like that. Now, we've refactored a lot. Let's do a Command B to make sure we have no errors or warnings. And then we're going to run this to test it. Make sure our avatars are showing up properly now that we're doing that. So favorites, cool. But that was probably in the cache. So let's do somebody else's follower. So DHH. Again, I just know that name pretty quick and easy. There we go. All of our avatars are loading nicely. Scroll down to make sure we're getting the next 100. Again, just testing things. Good to go. Cool. Let's pull up a user. Cool. Our user info header VC is working nicely. Cool. We've refactored. Everything's working great. Good to go. So let's stop running this and let's do one more thing that involves our networking. I'm going to minimize all these to, I don't know, it just bothers me sometimes. So remember, if we go to screens, right? Remember our follower list VC and user info VC? These have network calls, right? Where we have like the empty state, the loading view. And remember in our extensions here on UI view controller, we were having this show loading view, dismiss loading view. Like this can happen on every single view controller. And that may not be the case in the app. Again, our app is pretty simple, only a couple screens, but imagine you had an app with, 100 screens in it. You're not going to want every single view controller to have this ability. That could lead to, misusing that. So what we're going to create is we're going to create a view controller called like a data loading view controller that, follower list VC and favorites list VC will be a subclass of. That way, the only view controllers that have access to like the empty states and the loading screens, the stuff that has to deal with networking, will be our VCs that are actually loading data, which now that I look at it, like our follower list VC, our favorites list VC, and our user info VC all load data. So 3 out of the 4 of our screens are going to be data loading view controllers, but I still want to go through this exercise just because it's a learning thing. But in reality, if 3 out of 4 of your view controllers all need this behavior, you're probably fine to just keep it in a UI view controller extension. But again, I want to go through this exercise to show you how you would do this if you only had, like say you had 15 screens and only 5 of them were data loading view controllers. So just to show you how you could do this. So here in our custom views, in view controllers, let's do Command N. Cocoa Touch class, next. It's a subclass of a UI view controller. Nope, I don't want to name it view controller. I always do that. We're going to call this GF data loading VC. And again, this is going to be like similar to what we did with like a super class. Remember we did the super classes and the subclasses of view controllers. So here we're going to go to our UI view controller extension and literally just copy paste. So show empty state, dismiss loading view. Okay, present Safari VC can be on all view controllers. So let's cut this out of our UI view controller extension. So now our UI view controller extension, we're going to need this container view. We'll come back for that, is just presenting the alert and then presenting the Safari VC. So let's go to our data loading VC. So we'll highlight all this. We can paste that. So we got the show loading view. So this container view, remember we put the container view out here because extensions can't hold variables. Well, that is no longer an issue with us. So Command X, let's go to our data loading VC. We can actually make that a variable inside. So we don't need file private var or anything like that. So now we do Command B to see what kind of errors we get. Reference to container view. Okay, so this requires self.container view. And by the way, in these closures on like UIView.animate or Grand Central Dispatch closures, you don't have to do capture list. Let me put a caveat on that. There are some weird, rare edge cases where you do, but 99% of the time, you're not going to have to do like weak self in your UIView.animates or your GCD ones. Command B, let's see where we're failing here. Okay, we need self down here as well. Self, all right, we got a lot of errors it looks like. Self, Command B, build failed, that's fine. So what we need to do here is basically saying our favorites list VC has no show empty state. Well, let's go back to all of our view controllers that now need to be, remember this is a GF data loading VC, and this is gonna have our show loading view, dismiss loading view, empty state. So now we need to go to follower list VC, and we should have errors in here. Yes, we have errors because we're the loading view. So now our follower list VC needs to be a GF data loading VC, a subclass of that, because when we subclass of that, we're inheriting these functions, this empty state function, show loading view function. So back to our follower list VC. Yep, GF data loading VC, cool. Our favorites list VC is going to need that as well. So favorites list VC is now a GF data loading VC. And user info VC, same thing, is now a GF data loading VC. Let's do Command B. We should have no errors, hopefully. There we go. Build succeeded. So like I said, just like before, we created a super class of GF data loading VC, and then we made all of these subclasses of that to inherit those behaviors. Like I've been saying before, let's run this to test all of our refactoring. So let's SALEN. We want to make sure our loading screens and empty states work. Get followers, loading screen is working, cool. Let's go back, let's check our empty state. Hopefully nobody's followed Wendy. Luna, cool, empty state's working fine. Cool, so it looks like we are good to go. Let's just double check a user here. So favorites, click Paul, click on a user. Cool, that's working fine, great. App's working good with all the refactoring, good to go. So video number 2 of our optimization is done. As you can see, like we're doing a lot of work, even when we have the project already done, just to further optimize it and clean up our code. And we still got a couple more videos to go of optimization. So again, just to stress that how important this step is, like just because you're done, you have everything working, you still have a lot of work to do if you want to turn in a project like you're proud of and that's going to be really clean and really optimized. So on to the next video.